All right, I want to say this up front. I have zero desire to start a fight or an argument between Catholics and Protestants. That being said, hey, welcome back, my people. I am so glad that you're here. I hope wherever you are today, you are having a fantastic day, man. I say that in every video, and I genuinely mean it. If you are taking the time to watch these artistically creative expressions of things I long to put into the world, I hope you're having an amazing day. Two things are going to happen today. Number one, the cicadas are out in full force, so you're going to hear them in the background. It's just part of the ambiance of the day. And also, it's going to be traffic because I chose to do this in the more vibrantly, look at this, it's beautiful. The more vibrant part of my yard, and that means traffic. And that's what's going to happen. It is a beautiful day. I'm very thankful that there is a cool breeze on the air because I'm hoping that I don't sweat out my shirt today. Couple of things before we jump into today's video. Not a whole lot going on in the studio that's different. You know, that is one of the parts of being an artist, is that there are just a lot of same old days. There's a lot of just sitting down, making the stuff, working on some icons, prepping some other opportunities to share the artistic work that I'm doing. So that's really exciting. It's very encouraging. Not a whole lot going on other than that. Now, today, I want to jump right in and talk about the title of this video, Why I'm Catholic. You know, last week I put out a video called Why I'm Christian and Not an Atheist. And if you haven't seen that, you can go back and watch that video. It's a pretty good one. And what I want to do with this channel going forward is share the beautiful things of faith. Like I said last time, this is not apologetics. There are people infinitely smarter, wiser, and better at apologetics, and I encourage you to go check out their work. If you want to know the arguments, the philosophical and theological underpinnings of why we believe what we believe, go check them out. I'll put links in the description for people I think that you should be looking into if you want to know more of the apologetic stuff. I'm not here to cause arguments. I'm just here because I want to share the beautiful things of faith. And last week we on-ramped with just why Christianity and not other things. And before I go further into the Catholic specific part of why I am that iteration of Christianity, that's a weird way to say that, why I belong to that iteration of Christianity, I want to address a question that came up in the comments from last week's video from, and I apologize if you find this offensive, but Malachi Cookie Monster. And I say that because the commenter's primary name is Malachi, and then there's some like letters and numbers, and I forgot to memorize those, but I do remember that the profile picture is a Cookie Monster. So Malachi, if you're watching, Malachi Cookie Monster, that's what I'm going to refer to you as. But there was a really great question that this commenter asked, and it was why Christianity as my choice for, yeah, it's a loud truck. Why Christianity and not deism or Buddhism or Gnosticism, some other version of a belief in a creator God. And in my last video I addressed some of that, but I do want to address three specific areas: deism, Islam, and agnosticism. Because I did, in the last video I talked about atheism but not agnosticism, which that's a different enough category that I think is worth addressing, and I'm going to do it very quickly. So the reason I'm not a deist is because if God, so deism being the belief that there is a God, but he made the world, and if you think of it like a clockmaker, he wound it up, set it loose, and off it goes and does the thing, but God's not involved. For me, and again, this may not even be a good argument, but it is the reason I'm not a deist, is that deism seems to me to be, one, very impersonal, and that doesn't seem to adhere to a creator. And number two, it seems that morality in a deistic framework is very challenging for me personally, because if there's a God and if he made the world, but he has no desire to interact with it, why should I adhere to a sense of morality? And if that's true, if this deistic God isn't morally interested in the world, why should I even try to conform my life to this idea that there's a God? It just philosophically doesn't work for me. So deism, and in the beginning I did wrestle with that. Well, what if there is a God but he just doesn't care? There's enough historical evidence for the life of Jesus that I just don't find that plausible. So deism ultimately didn't land. As to Islam, I did not pursue the Islamic faith because I have been to a multitude of Islamic countries, and I have lived in an Islamic country, and I lived there for a good chunk of time. And there's nothing that I saw in those experiences that made me think, hey, this is something I want to check out. That's all I'm going to say about that. Now, agnosticism is probably for me the most understandable of all the particular philosophical and theological ways you could approach life. I have a lot of sympathy and compassion for my I have a lot of compassion and sympathy for my agnostic friends. I get it. I understand the desire to be like, you know what, all this stuff is really frustrating, and it's easier for me to say I just don't know, and I'm only going to adhere to what I can see. I get that. I understand that. That does not land for me because there is so much more to the reality of human life, the unexplainable, the mystical, and the miraculous, that I cannot just throw up my hands and say, this, I don't know, I'm just going to do life based on what I can see. That doesn't work for me. Now again, I'm not saying that's a great argument. I'm not saying that's the argument. All I'm doing is answering the question as best as I can explain from my own personal journey. Agnosticism ultimately led me in the few, well, that's not a good way to say that. Agnosticism led for me to a pretty nihilistic worldview. And that was my problem with both atheism and agnosticism. So if you're in that camp, you consider yourself an agnostic, and it's easier to just say, I don't know, I get it. I would encourage you to grapple with the question of, is there more to reality than just the things I can touch and see and quote unquote measure? Yeah, so Malachi, Cookie Monster, I hope that answers your question. Comment, let me know. I'd love to hear what you think on that. So anyways, let's jump into the thing I am most excited to talk about today, and that is why I am Catholic. Now, to do that, I need to give you some backstory, and then I'm going to give you 3 brief reasons amongst the myriad of reasons for why I am Catholic. And you can see, like, it just makes me move. I can't even stand still when I talk about this stuff, because I love it, because it is the core of who I am as a person, and that is Christ and his church. And there's not a day that goes by that I'm not thankful that I am Catholic. Now, let me tell you a little bit about my backstory. I grew up Protestant in the Church of Christ, and though there are many, many things that I disagree with, I will say from the outset, I am very thankful for the gifts that were given to me through the Church of Christ in my early years. That said, in my late 20s, I got to a point where I was pretty frustrated with what I was seeing and feeling within the church I attended. And it brought me to a point of there is either nothing or there's more. And I grappled with it for a while and chose to pursue the idea that there has to be more to what we are called to be as people who follow Jesus. And that led me out of the Church of Christ with my wife, and we became a part of an evangelical non-denominational church, and we did that for a while. And in a part of that journey, we became missionaries overseas, and we did that for a while. And in the midst of all of that, we were spiritually abused, and we came home in a pretty bad state. And I use that phrase, spiritual abuse, and I don't use it lightly, and I don't use it as a catch-all. I use that phrase because it's what the counselor that my wife and I worked with told me after we told him our story. And I use it because a counselor said that's what we had experienced. Airplane. So again, I use the phrase spiritual abuse just to give context for where we were. Because when we came back, leaving Christianity, despite all of the pain in my heart, leaving Christianity wasn't an option for me because I had done life without Jesus before, and I had zero desire to go back to that. For a lot of reasons I'm not going to talk about in this video. I might talk about at a later time. When we came back, we stuck to the church that we had been a part of despite the abuse, and it wasn't until we did a counseling program in Colorado that we decided to leave and go on this journey of trying to find where God was calling us to be. And we tried so many different denominations, all of them Protestant, all of them trying to find where it was that God was calling us to be. And then this terrible thing happened in the world called COVID. And I recognize that it was a terrible, awful time in human history. But for us, there was a glimmer of goodness in it. And it was that we got to stop going to church. Because we needed to stop going to church because we were just falling further and further down the discouragement hole. And it was in that time when we weren't going to church and we were trying to do kind of like a home church that I started reading different things from different people. And I don't remember what the first Catholic-y thing was that I read, but I remember the first argument that I wrestled with. And that first argument was the prayer to the saints. And I wrestled out that argument and I thought, oh man, this is very logical and very rational. I can understand the arguments, and I'm not going to make them here. Go see other videos from other people. I understood the arguments for why it's acceptable to pray to the saints. In fact, why we should pray to the saints and the Blessed Mother. And that led me on a series of explorations and arguments. I remember watching a lot of Father Mike Schmidt's videos and arguing profusely with him in my head, mostly because he was just far happier than I was, and it bothered me. Not his fault. But the more I explored the Catholic faith, the more I realized this was the place, the land, if you want to call it that, to which God was calling me. And so my wife and I explored that. We started visiting a Catholic parish here in town. We did the RCIA program. And I think more than anything, it was watching my kids engage with the faith that actually drove the desire even further for my wife and I, because watching my kids in awe of the Mass and watching my kids in awe of the saints and the Blessed Mother and all these amazing things that we were experiencing, like I got to watch them through my kids' eyes, and that for me cemented the idea and the reality that this was where God was inviting us to be. So we converted. We left Protestantism and we joined the Catholic Church a while ago. We joined the Catholic Church a while ago, and we have been a part of it ever since. We did have, I want to say it was about 6 months into being Catholic, we had a moment where it was like an oh shoot moment, like, oh, are we crazy? Did we do the wrong thing? And we went and visited a Baptist church for a little while. Nothing particularly against Baptist church. It was just not the place for us to be. And I knew that when the pastor said at the invitational call at the end of his sermon, you should come and give your life to Jesus because you disappoint God. That for me was it. I'm out. I'm done. I'm going back to my Catholic church where Christ loves me so much that he gives me his body and blood on a daily basis to feed and nourish my soul. That's like a super short explanation of how I even became Catholic, because I am not cradle. I did not grow up Catholic. I converted. I chose this. I actively made the decision to seek out answers to questions I had and to accept the truth that the Catholic Church teaches. Now, all that said, let me tell you 3 reasons why I am Catholic and why I love being Catholic. And number 1, the most important, and this is probably the one that got me into the church before all other arguments, and that is the Eucharist. I cannot explain the joy of receiving Christ in his miraculous body on a weekly, if not daily basis. Like, there's just never in all of my Christian experience have I had the privilege of participating in something so beautiful. I love the Mass. I love everything about the Mass. Even the Novus Ordo. For all my Catholics out there, don't hate. Even the Novus Ordo for what it is, and praise the Lord, our priest takes the Mass very seriously, and he makes the Novus Ordo about as reverent as you can make it. But I love the Mass. I love being with my Catholic brothers and sisters, worshiping the Lord and participating in the great sacrifice of Christ. You know, there's lots of really good arguments for why the Eucharist is what it is. And if you want to check those out, go look at guys like Trent Horn or Joe Heschmeyer or Capturing Christianity, Cameron Bertuzzi. These guys have much better videos and much better ways of explaining these arguments than I will probably ever come up with. But from an artist perspective, the Mass and the Eucharist encapsulates my whole person. It is a full soul experience, and I freaking love it. So that's the first reason I became Catholic. It was the argument for the Eucharist, and I bought hook, line, and sinker because it's true and it's worth holding on to. And I grieve for my Protestant brothers and sisters who do not have the opportunity to participate in this miracle. It's gorgeous and I love it. The second reason I became Catholic and am Catholic is the saints. For me, growing up in the church, there was Jesus and the apostles, 1,950-ish years of blank space, and then there was the church that I grew up in. And all of that blank space was empty. No church history, no saints, no nothing. And when I was introduced to the saints, it was like coming home to a family I did not know. It was as if I had been orphaned in a foreign country, and a king came from a far off country and brought me home into a kingdom where I have more family than I can count. And the saints, I love the way Father Lean says it in his book, Progress Through Mental Prayer. The saints are those to whom we admire, because in admiring them we become like Christ. Because we are trying to do what they did, and that is imitate the life of Christ with our every breath. And there's so much about praying to the life of the there's so much about the life of the saints, and having the beautiful opportunity to pray to and commune with this incredible body of believers, as the writer of Hebrews says, this great cloud of witnesses, that encourages me. Because one of the things I always struggled with growing up, and even in most of my adulthood, was a deep sense of loneliness. Like I don't belong anywhere. And it is in the communion of saints that I find... It's another car, right in the middle of a good word too. It is in the communion of saints that I find I'm not alone. And it's beautiful. And then the third reason that I'm Catholic is kind of what I've already hinted at several times. It's just, of all the different denominations I've been to and been a part of, there is nothing that can come remotely close to the beauty of the Catholic faith. And I mean that in just an artistic sense. The cathedrals, the buildings, the icons, the statues, the rosaries. It is as if, man, and Matt Fradd quotes this all the time, and I can't remember who said it. I think it might be C.S. Lewis. I might be wrong though. But he says this all the time, like, Protestants look at the Catholic faith and see an overrun jungle. Catholics look at the Protestant faith and see a desert. And that's pretty appropriate. As a Protestant, it felt very much like wandering through the desert. And you have very little to nourish and feed the soul as you wander on this pilgrimage. And coming home to the Catholic Church was like coming from a desert into an oasis. And the beauty of an oasis is that everything is available. Everything you need is there. You don't have to participate and consume all of it. You know, Father Jose Maria Escriva says that the Catholic Church has many, many treasures. Pick a few and remain faithful. And that's so true. There are so many things that are beautiful about the Catholic Church, and you don't have to utilize all of them. But if you pick a few and you let God nourish your soul that way through those specific things, it's just so good. That's the only way I know how to say it. But the Catholic faith is beautiful. The incense, the bells, it consumes the whole person, and it allows the whole of the soul to participate in the faith rather than just one or two small pieces. So that is, that is probably enough for today. That's why I'm Catholic, because I explored the faith, I found it to be true, and I found it to be beautiful. I hope you have an amazing rest of your day. I hope you give Catholicism an honest exploration. And until I see you next time, keep climbing.